Minerva presents. Hello, literary wanderers, and let's wander through the realms of imagination together. Join me as we traverse the vivid landscapes of the road by Cormac McCarthy. If you're finding value and enjoyment in my videos, I'd be thrilled if you hit that like button and join the community by subscribing following my channel. And remember, your comments are like gold to me, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts. The novel begins with a father looking over his child as he sleeps. It soon becomes apparent that they are sleeping outside, and the father questions whether they can make it through the winter. He takes his cart and pushes his child and their knapsacks along the road. Before long, they reach an abandoned gas station. The father tries calling his old house, and his son asks what he is doing. A moment later, they leave the gas station but turn back to get some oil. Further down the road, they reach the city, and the father comments that there is no smoke coming from the city, so presumably there is no life there. It starts to rain, but once it finishes, they set up camp and fall asleep. Still awake, the child asks his father about death, and the father gently reassures his son that they will not die just yet. In the morning, the father steps away from his son so the son will not hear the father's coughing fit. At this point, the father prays to God. Father and son make their way down to the city and arrive by noon. The city is deserted and ash and dust covers everything. In one of the doorways lies a dead, dried up body. Again, the father reassures his son. The father remembers his own childhood when he used to go boating with his uncle on a lake. He recalls the scene vividly, claiming it was the perfect time of his childhood. Father and son now travel south, but the weather is getting colder and the cart needs fixing. Lying in the rain, the father claims the two of them could die if they get wet. So he pulls the tarp around himself and his son. In what seems to cover a long period, the father talks about the impenetrable blackness. At the end of the section, a snowflake lands on the child's hand. They come to another garage, and the father builds a fire. He then fixes his cart, and they both fall asleep. The next day, they come to a barn with 3 bodies hanging inside. The boy thinks there may be corn nearby, but the father decides to leave immediately. They find a ham in a smokehouse that is fresh enough to eat. Later, the man dreams of a woman he once knew, but he soon wakes, claiming that dreaming is not good. The next day, the father fixes some brooms to his cart so they can sweep away limbs when they move down the road. A while later, they come to the edge of a city, and the father finds some blankets inside a house. The next stop is a supermarket where they try in vain to find a new card. However, the father does recover a can of Coke, which he gives to his son. They then come to the house where the father grew up. The boy is scared to go in, but follows his father anyway. At the end of the day, the father looks upon his sleeping son and asks when it comes down to it, can he really do it? They eat fermented rice and beans prepared a few days before, and the father notes how thin his boy is getting, questioning whether he is a good father. In the morning, he remembers it is the end of the year, and they have to get through the mountains, though it could well mean their death. In the mountains, they travel slowly, building fires and leaving them alight so no one can know exactly where they are. At the end of the section, the father has a coughing fit and coughs up blood. They are running out of food, and the father dreams of the woman again, who it turns out is dead. By the end of the section, the father claims that there are no more godly men left in the world. The snow is getting worse, and pushing the cart through the mountains is becoming exhausting. Just when the father is thinking of leaving the cart, he sees their destination, which he names the Gap. He knows it from he was a boy. The father begins to wish they had something to use as a sled runner for the cart. There is no chance of finding anything in the mountains, so they end up resting. The boy finds some toys when they take things from the cart, but later on, he has a bad dream about a toy penguin. At the end of the section, they find a river. They leave the cart in a parking lot and walk down to a waterfall. Both the father and son wash themselves before heading back into the woods. In the woods, they find mushrooms and enjoy a good dinner. They come to a road, which the father calls the state's roads, but then says states do not exist anymore. Along the road, they come to a jackknifed truck. It is raining, so they stay the night inside the truck. When they wake, the rain has stopped. The father looks to see what is inside the trailer, and it is full of dead humans. They move on. The father finds some fresh footprints. It is not long before they come to a man, limping down the road, his body burnt. The man collapses in the road, and the father tells his boy the man has been struck by lightning. Much to the boy's dismay, the father leaves the man where he lies, and they walk on. The father dreams about his wife again. The next day, he and the boy play cards. He cannot remember the old games, so he makes up new ones. He reflects on his wife. She shot herself just before they started their road trip. A while later, they spy a group of people climbing out of a truck and wearing gas masks. They hide in a bush, but when one of the men walks towards their hiding place, the father pulls out a pistol. The man grabs the child and puts a knife to his throat. In reply, the father shoots the man in the head. They camp near the men in the truck, but out of sight in the woods. The father goes off to find some wood, leaving the boy where he is, so they do not lose the cart. In the morning, the father washes the blood from his son's hair, and they move on. They come to an inhabited town, but continue walking through, as they are desperate for food. The only food they find is cornmeal to make cakes. They sleep the night in an old car. The next day, a boy comes up to the son. The son calls out to the boy, but the boy runs away. The father then drags his son out of the village, despite his protests at having to leave the boy. They wander on. The boy has some raisins in his pocket and they eat them, but it is the last of their food. The boy asks his father if they are going to die, and he tells him no. They come to a stone wall. Hanging from the wall are human heads, and they move on quickly. Further down the road, they hear people and hide. A large number of people march by. Some are pregnant women and slaves. The father says that these are the bad guys. It is snowing, and the boy is becoming increasingly cold. The father wonders how long the father can last. The boy asks again if they are dying. Eventually, they find somewhere dry enough to sleep in the woods. But in the middle of the night, trees begin to fall and they have to run to safety. They look for the cart, which they left outside the woods. The boy is really struggling as the snow reaches his knees. At one point, the boy falls in the snow, and the father has to pick him up. Eventually, they find the cart, and the father makes some wrappings for their feet out of an old coat and bits of tarp. The father continues, tell his son they are not going to die. However, they have no food and they eat snow. The snow is so deep that the father camps on the road thinking no one could possibly come by in such bad weather. In the morning, he is worried about their tracks, so they create false tracks before setting off again. Eventually, they come to a town and a nice-looking house, so the father decides to risk going inside. They find a locked pantry door, which the father uses a shovel to pry open. Unfortunately, it is full of barely alive, naked people, so the father and son run away. Outside, they see 6 people walking towards the house, so they hide. The father gives the boy a gun to kill himself if the people find them. Both of them are increasingly weak. The father tries to carry his son, but he cannot carry him very far. Finally, they sleep in the woods. While his son is asleep, The father feels for his son's heartbeat. The father carries his son across a field, but he has to stop every 50 steps. Finally, they rest for the night. The father sees a house and decides to take a risk to explore the place while the son sleeps. The father leaves the pistol beside the boy. The father goes to the barn where there are bales, and he munches on corn seeds. He then makes his way to the house where he finds a few useful items such as a screwdriver. Back outside, he finds some apples and fills a basket with them. He suddenly looks back at the house and realizes that there is a cistern of fresh water. The next morning, the father and his son wrap themselves in blankets, eat the apples, and drink the water. The next day, they collect more apples and then head back onto the road. Unfortunately, it rains and the father says it is their worst night so far on the road. They sleep under a bridge. The boy wants a fire, but the father says he has lost the lighter. The boy talks about the naked people in the cellar, and he asks the father if they could not possibly have helped them. They finish the last of the apples, prompting the boy to ask if they will ever have to eat a human. The father reassures his son that this will never happen. Later, they are sitting in a truck surrounded by billboards, one of which warns of death. After their rest, they find a house, and the father looks through a tool shed and finds gasoline. Realizing there is something under the ground outside, he uncovers a locked trap door. The boy begs him not to enter, which makes the father wonder how much more the boy can take. With the gasoline and some bottles, the father makes lamps. He tells his boy, good guys do not give in to fear, and leads him to the hidden door in the garden, where they break the lock and walk down the steps. The section finishes with the father saying, "Oh my God!" In the cellar, they find everything they could possibly need. Obviously, someone had stocked up before the disaster, and they have left hundreds of tins of food and drink. There is also heating and a second room with a toilet. The boy wishes they could stay forever, but the father thinks it would be dangerous. Nevertheless, they enjoy it for a while, filling their stomachs, relaxing, and even taking a bath. They leave on a full stomach and high spirits. The boy in particular talks about spaceships and traveling to Mars. The first time in the story, he acts with childlike enthusiasm. When they stop for the night, the boy asks what their long-term goals are, and his father asks where he heard such a term. They meet an old man on the road, and the boy begs his father to give him food. Once the old man has eaten, he becomes more talkative, and they decide he can stay with them for the night. The old man and the father talk about God, in whom the old man says he longer believes. He also tells the father he does not trust him and most of what leaves. The father has a coughing fit and thinks about dying. They set up camp, but when the father wakes up, the boy is gone. He is about to go and look for him when he spies the boy rushing across the field, whooshing across the field. The boy tells him he has found a train. They look around the train, but they find nothing but a few paper plates. Things are now not so great. They are running out of food, and all the houses they come to are empty. They find a telephone directory in a gas station, and the father uses it to find out where they are. They are 50 miles away from where he thought they were. They continue down the road until 3 men stop them, asking what they have in their cart. The father pulls out his pistol, and the men leave them alone. The father's cough is getting so bad that the boy asks if the father dying. The father says he is not, but he needs to rest, so they camp in the same place for 3 days. The father spies some boys burning snakes. He says they are just a little older than his son, but still calls them men. The father's son is becoming much stronger as a person and offering his point of view about things. When they both agree someone is following them, the boy suggests they hide and wait to see who it is. 3 men and a pregnant woman walk past. A little further down the road, they see the group's fire and smell food. When they go into the woods, the 3 people have disappeared, but an infant is cooking on the fire. They move on and come to a house. The father wants to keep on walking, but they have not eaten for 2 days. He worries that the 3 people they met earlier may be inside, but in the end takes the risk. The door to the house is propped open, and the boy worries it is because someone is inside. The father reassures him and they enter. Inside what is a very nice house, they find tins of food. The father thinks the food could be poison, but will be edible if they cook it well. They stay in the house for 4 days and find some new clothes and a wheelbarrow. Soon after they leave the house, they come upon a gas station and find some gasoline. At the end of the section, they arrive at a beach. They sit on the beach, and the boy goes for a swim. When he comes back, he is freezing, so the father warms him up with food and a fire. The boy wants to stay here. They comb the beach, but all they see are the bones of dead fish and cattle. However, they finally come upon an abandoned boat. The boy reluctantly stays on the beach while his father swims out to see what is inside. 41 in. The man finds some clothes in the boat and puts them on and walks out on the deck to wave to the boy. The boy does not recognize him. When he goes back inside, he finds some soap and Spanish books. The man continues to look through the boat. Finally, the father swims back to his son and they walk back to their campsite. The boy cries because he has forgotten the pistol, but they go back and it is still there. Unfortunately, it is raining and a storm is approaching. The man knows they need to get away from the beach, but they cannot find their campsite. Finally, he hears the rain falling on the tarp and they follow the sound. The man makes repeated visits to the boat bringing back food. On his final visit, he finds a flare gun. The boy says there is no one to signal, but the father tells him we'll use it to shoot at people. The boy falls ill. The father uses the first aid kit from the ship, but he is very worried and he refuses to let him die. Eventually, the boy gets better and starts to eat again. On day, they arrive back at their campsite to find everything gone. The father and the boy go looking for the thief, finding him through the sand he leaves on the road. When the thief sees them, he pulls out a butcher knife, and in response, the father pulls out his pistol. The man puts down the knife and gives back their cart. However, the father demands the thief take off all his clothes. The boy protests, but his father is insistent, and they leave the man naked at the side of the road. Later on, by a fire, the father tells his boy he did not kill the thief, and the boy tells him he did. After a few days, they come to a port town. As they are walking past the last house, someone shoots an arrow in the father's leg. The father shoots a flare in retaliation and hits his target. When he goes inside the house, a woman is nursing the man and he leaves. The father fixes his leg, stitching up the wound. However, he is now really suffering, constantly coughing up blood. The father dies, but tells the boy to keep moving on. The boy struggles on south. Sometime later, he is face to face with another man. The man asks the boy to put his gun away and come with him. He says that he has 2 children and a wife. The boy is afraid and asks how he knows if he is one of the good guys. The man says he will just have to take the risk. Eventually, the boy goes along and everything is as the man promised,